But
On that same line, what about archaeological evidence of a first century Christian?
yeah, so
Is there any archaeological evidence? I know that we have from the Byzantine era, you have plenty of archaeology in Israel that demonstrates a later movement of Christianity, but is there any archaeology that shows during that time,
first century.
first century?
All right, so nothing like, for instance, we go to Hezekiah's tunnels right outside the old city in the southern part. There actually was a plaque there, which the British took it and they brought it to the British Museum, which actually identifies that this is the tunnel made by Hezekiah during the siege, the Assyrian siege. There's nothing like that in the church. Doesn't exist. There is a lot of archaeology about, which means that they found a place that people in Capernaum, in wherever in the north, where they say this was an early church of where Christians may have worshipped. There is that kind of stuff. There may be other things that I'm familiar with. My expertise isn't in archaeology, but there's a man here who is, and he's a film producer, and his name is Jim Long, he's my dear friend, so he might answer that.
I was totally just going to point out that in tandem with the next question is, as a longtime visitor to Eretz Israel, one of the most popular archaeological sites, so popular that they've had to expand the store and the restaurant and the parking lot to accommodate multiple buses, is Qumran. And the reason it's so, and you can ask, I can ask any of our friends, our Jewish friends in Eretz Israel, I can mention Qumran and they go, where's that? And you can talk to an observant Jew in Israel, and most of them have never been, they've been in Masada, which is right down the road, but they've never been to Qumran, and the reason is that it's this huge accepted conceit among scholars that the foundations of Christianity began with the Dead Sea Scrolls site at Qumran. This was an idea that was fostered by all the Dead Sea scholars, who were all Catholic, by the way. The gentlemen who first translated the Dead Sea Scrolls were Catholics, and they were convinced that the Essene community was the beginning of Christianity because of the way that the Essenes lived. The problem with that is that these guys were supposed to live like monks, which is very appealing to a Christian mindset, a Catholic mindset. But if you, out of all the 800 odd scrolls found at Qumran, none of them mention the word Essene. And if you read Lawrence Schiffman's book on the Dead Sea Scrolls, a Jewish scholar who I think also has a Smicha, he will tell you that if you read the Dead Sea Scrolls, there is nothing Christian about the writings. It's simply a sect of probably Pharisaical Jews who were living outside of Jerusalem. And our late dear departed friend Bendel said they couldn't have been monks because he and another archaeologist found 5 graves with women buried in them. Some of them had died in childbirth.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Dr. Lawrence Schiffman is a very dear friend of mine. He's one of the world's leading scholars on the Dead Sea community. And just to repeat over what Jim Long has just said, is that we typically identify those who live in the Dead Sea part of that community as Essenes. They, in fact, as Jim just said, never identify themselves as Essenes, and we don't even know what the word Essene means. Maybe yes and no. Actually, there are about 20 viable. I had this conversation with Dr. Schiffman a few months ago. So we can come up with about 20 different meaning. What does that word actually mean? The literature that we find in the Dead Sea is pre-Christian, which means nothing is there that comes during the first century. All of it is, a lot of it from the 2nd century BC, 1st century, a little 3rd century BC. And in Larry Schiffman's assessment, this was probably a sort of a righteous or pious Sadducee community that lived there. And the question is did that community produce a kind of thinking that could have, this is what Christians will argue, is that could have created a fertile ground for Christian thinking to have been advanced. Our knowledge of the Essenes from the ancient world is from 3 primary sources. So one is extensively Philo, and the other would be Josephus, extensive, and the other would be Pliny the Elder. But Pliny the Elder fudged it a lot. He presents himself as an eyewitness, and he wasn't, because his dates are all off. The Qumran community was destroyed by the Romans during the war with Rome in the year 68. The imagery of a community that's monastic, celibate, and so on is very much an image, and lived exclusively in this Dead Sea area, is very much what Pliny the Elder, who dies in the volcano. He actually, the volcano is erupting, and he's a historian, he wants to be an eyewitness. I guess it didn't dawn on him that trying to get close to the volcano would not have been a good idea. So he's going to be incinerated in 79 when he actually, the only guy running toward the volcano. But his writings have survived, and he describes them, first of all, as all being in the Dead Sea area. He's wrong about that. They were all over the land of Israel. This community, the Essenes, were all over the land of Israel, as Josephus describes it. They were almost certainly not monastic, not celibate, and so on, but also not monolithic. There are enormous transitions. There's a whole period of time where they go through changes, and in fact, they get a new leader, a teacher of righteousness, who comes to them and tells them this is how they ought to behave, this is what they're doing wrong, this is what they're doing correctly, and so on and so forth. So it's not a monolithic community, but no real scholar no Christian scholar will say that you will find Christian writings in the Dead Sea. That just doesn't. You may find, I don't know, some, but no one will ever say it's just not true. When Jim also talks about 800-900 scrolls, it's overwhelmingly fragments. But there are some. It's a very interesting place. We don't need it. It's not really relevant to the Jews because we always knew that our Torah was intact, our Tanakh was intact. And the Dead Sea community, when I say that's why it's not a big deal in the Orthodox religious community, it's like that's not relevant. We were there at Mount Sinai. It's not the way we think. It's just our orientation is not that they found. It is very interesting to us, but it's not wow. But to the Christian who does not have any tradition, like if you're in Israel and you see these places like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and all these churches that are built over places that Jesus supposedly did this in the New Testament, that who said that this is where the crucifixion was? Who was the person who identified all these spots? Her name was Helena, who was the mother of Constantine, and she did this in what year was she traveling Israel, saying this is where this happened, this is where that happened, and this is where this happened. What was the year? That's correct. Exactly the same year of the Council of Nicaea. She wasn't in Nicaea. She was in Israel, going from place to place and saying, this is where Jesus crucified, this is where the Last Supper was, this is the Garden of Gethsemane, this is it, and then churches were then built on them. What I'm telling you is not controversial. Any Christians there is, so that's where all it goes to her. She's there, she converts, she's a pagan, but she converts to Christianity after her son converts. The son converts after a very important war in the early 4th century, and then subsequently she converts, and she then identifies even what is the real cross. She finds the actual cross of Jesus, and so on. So that all is really late. There is no connection. In contrast, if you have the Tomb of the Patriarchs, we have that for 4,000 years, and ongoing, unbroken. And remember that the Bnei Yishmael, the Arabs, are considered that site to be holy too. So they're a witness to it. They always knew it's there. It was always, we always knew it was there. It was never a time Tomb of Rachel and so on. These are places we have ongoing, non-stop, unbroken, so on. So that doesn't. But we don't look to archaeology for support. We look to what does God think? What does the Bible say?